So today I thought I would try to redesign the tourbillon with a more aesthetic goal. Now, as you've seen in my previous videos, I've only been using green filament because it's been the most consistent and it's, I guess, worked the best for me. However, I'm going to see if I can actually print these parts with much less consistent filaments. Now, I have had issues with this black filament in the past. In my experience, it does tend to glob up a little bit, probably because it's not the best quality filament. Here's the design that I'm going to try to print out. Okay, I think this is definitely a bit of a bed leveling problem, but I'm just going to let it run. Because I have a 3-layer raft going, I think it should be fine. The filament seems to be layering on pretty unevenly, because I think when I ordered this I just went for the cheapest option on Amazon. And it is pretty obvious that this is not the best quality. I guess the lesson learned here is to not cheap out on no-name brand filament, because I still have some hope that I can salvage this part, even though it looks like it's not doing too great. In the meantime, I am going to search for some cheap yet reliable filaments. If you guys have any recommendations, let me know in the comments. While the parts are printing, I just wanted to speak a little bit about the design process that I went through to get to this tourbillon design. In the very beginning, I had this sort of preliminary design for the tourbillon. As you can see here, I didn't really care too much about the aesthetic. And I guess based on this design, which was functional, I took the most important dimensions, for example, the placement of these different shafts. I wrote them down and I transferred them to a completely new design where I was able to be a little more creative with the overall design. Now, I've never really done this sort of creative artistic design in CAD before, so it was just really fun to test my creativity and artistic skills in a different medium. Now, I have a couple suspicions as to why this filament may not be the best quality. First of all, as you can see here on the build plate, there are places where the extruder nozzle came into contact with the build plate, and that usually completely prevents the filament from coming out. But in this case, as you can see here, it sort of stains the build plate with pigment or something, and it leaves a sort of thin film or residue behind. In addition, this filament doesn't really smell like the PLA that I'm used to, which leads me to believe it's some sort of off-brand plastic that's not quite PLA. So again, I'm open to suggestions if you have any good black or dark gray filament suggestions. Putting these things aside, I think the surface finish is actually looking a lot better than I remember it to be. The layers all look pretty even, and the surfaces look pretty smooth and uniform. Now, one of the parts I was hoping to print in black is actually this part, which has a feature that requires support material. Now, given how the print is currently going, I honestly can't really tell how this support material will actually fare for the filament, but regardless, I'm holding out hope. Alright, so this print was successful. Now I'm actually very curious to see how easily this will come off its raft. It's actually lifting up off of the support material pretty nicely, so I think I should be able to sort of jimmy this palette knife under a little bit. Oh yeah. Okay, I think I was a little too rough. I think I actually separated this bottom part from the top part a little bit, but I'm gonna try to see if I can salvage this part. So it looks like I took off a couple layers of the part, maybe just one layer, so it sort of looks discolored here. where I cut into the part itself. Again, not the best experience. This definitely does not feel like PLA. It's really mushy, but we'll see how the rest of the parts go. Ugh. Okay, this is not a pleasant experience. So after removing the raft, this is what I'm left with. I tried removing all of the support material. This is honestly the best I could do. As far as the part itself goes, there's some issues that I ran into, mainly this doesn't want to stick together for some reason. I suppose I can glue it together or something. First layer of the next part seems to be going really well. I actually lowered the bed a little bit, and so it's actually not jamming up the extruder so much. Hopefully it won't have any bed adhesion issues either, now that it's so far away from the build plate. So I think I had a lot more success with the lowered print bed. The part looks like it came out pretty nicely, and there's no residue like with before when the extruder was too close to the print bed. Now we just have to get the support material out. Okay, so that was a bit of a fail. I'm starting to realize that there are some adhesion issues with this. Maybe I was just being a little too careless, but next up, the balance components. I'm going to be printing these in this white filament here. Hopefully we'll see some decent results. First layer of white is looking significantly better than that first layer of black. I'm also hopeful that this filament will have better layer-to-layer adhesion, because I really don't want these parts to be falling apart on me. So while these white parts are printing, I'm going ahead and setting up the G-code file for the last part, which is going to be printed out of green filament. So the white parts came out really nicely. Now with a lot of these parts, this is something that I didn't really show on camera too much. When these parts come right off the printer, they are not exactly accurate. So what I like to do in order to fix this is either use some sort of tool to remount the hole a little bit, but also I like to attach this brass rod into the chuck of a drill. So what I do is take whatever's out. I use this brass shaft, put it into the chuck, and just drill away. And what this does is it sort of makes the inner diameter of this hole exactly match up to the diameter of the shaft itself, because I don't have a drill bit or anything for the exact diameter that I want it to be. And as you can see now, I can spin it freely without running into too much friction. Now I do the same thing with the balance wheel and the pallet fork. Now as you can see, the balance wheel now just completely freely turns on its axle. And so does the pallet fork and the escape wheel. So that's really the extent of post-processing that I have to do with these parts. While I would like to try to tweak the design so that they're perfect right off the printer, there are just too many variables that I don't have control over in the production of these parts. So as a last step, I just like to do what I just did with the brass shafts and these parts. So right now I'm testing to see if everything fits together so far that's printed. Right now I think it seems to work really well. The gear's turning properly. Now, while I do enjoy being able to cut these brass shafts from the comfort of my own room, the last thing I want is to be breathing these particles and getting these all over in my food and drinks. So I think it's a good idea to bring this into the garage or outside and cut them there. But in the meantime, my green filament is actually working really well with the final part that I need. These two parts fit together really nicely. They're not the sort of pressure fit I was originally intending, but I think this might actually work for now. I'll probably just secure it with some glue or something, but this isn't really an essential part to the functioning of the tourbillon itself. So I made the cuts, and right now I'm just breaking them that are approximately the sizes that I need, and I'm going to later smooth out the rough edges. Now I haven't done anything to this part after I took it off the printer, so obviously the holes are going to be a little off dimension. They're a little too small, but they're just the right size where I can take a hammer and lightly hammer them in to create a nice interference fit. So I think it's safe to say that this was a success. The tourbillon works. I think I'll keep it as is for now, as I continue to design the rest of the clock. But for now, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So my second revision to the tourbillon cage, this design is loosely based on the A Longa Zona tourbillon, which I think is a really cool design. And if you're wondering what that looks like this.